Hey guys, welcome back to Robinson Homebuyers. We are thankful that you've joined us today. Today we want to talk about where do you begin to overcome some of these fears in getting out of the whole analysis paralysis, and how do you begin to overcome those fears? It's a big step to jump into real estate.
Yeah, and we also just want to say, if you like the content that gets put out today, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, which you'll also have an opportunity at the end. But yeah, last week we ended with, just how do you get out there? You just got to do it. At some point, I shared how the webinar I listened to really inspired me to start making offers, so that hopefully within 30 days we would acquire our first property. And so that's kind of where we want to talk a little bit more today is how did we get our first property? And then in the weeks ahead, we're going to break down some details of that first property in hopes that it might help you understand how we even go about still to this day analyzing if something's a good deal or not to jump into. So
the first thing we did, we mentioned last week, was we went to the bank. We had to go to the bank to get approved for financing, to get qualified for financing for rental properties is what we were headed for.
Yeah. Which we didn't even think it might not even be possible.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a pastor. Even the way that my income works, I'm able to, have a lot of tax benefits and write-offs. And so at the end of the day, my salary is very, very low. Yeah. And so we thought it's probably not even possible we get a loan, but we don't know until we ask.
Yeah.
So
we did. We got qualified for that.
For more than I even thought we would.
But we also applied for a home equity line of credit. So a HELOC.
Yeah, and that one's really an important step because, when you see a lot of people talk about buy a property with no money down, again, there's just really no such thing. Every property is going to cost something. It's just a matter of where do you come up with the down payment and the rehab cost if you're flipping or if there's repairs even involved in a rental. And so that really is the big thing that has to be overcome. That's why some people partner with others who have money. In our case, everybody really has somewhere they can go typically if the deal is good enough. Yeah. But for us, we didn't really have anything.
We had nothing
except.
But we were fortunate to have bought our home when we did. And the basement was completely unfinished, so we had lots of instant equity that was just sitting there for years.
Yeah, and we had been in our house by this point almost 8 years, and so we live in an area where the market, we've benefited from the market just really going up. And so we knew if we were going to come up with a down payment for anything, it was going to come from us getting a home equity line of credit with our local credit union where we bank. And the introductory rate was 3.99%. So that was guaranteed for 6 months at an interest only rate. And the nice thing with a home equity line of credit is when you use that, it's like somebody who has a credit card. I mean, except you only have so much equity that's allowed to be used by your bank. And in our case, I think it was 90% of what was freed up in our equity we could tap into. And you just borrow it, you pay the interest only, and then you pay the principal back. In our case, it was going to be from the profits of the house. That was the first thing. You always pay it back. That's the only way it makes sense, or else you will get yourself into a lot of trouble, and it's a lot of risk at that point. So,
and again, we got the HELOC simply we needed it for a down payment on a rental property, anywhere from 10 to 20 or 15 to 20%.
Yeah, it was 10 to 20%. So our bank, which I love our bank here in Utah, by the way, Mountain America Credit Union, they have some awesome investor products, especially for rental properties. And they had they were running some at the time. They don't have it right now, but it was a 10% down product. So we thought, okay, we buy a rental property. We've got to find something really on the low end. They approved us for a lot, but we knew kind of what was within our bounds of of capabilities to really, make sense. So it's like we didn't want to borrow the full amount that they even approved us for. So let's look for something small, something to cut our teeth on, something that, it's not going to be a great big deal for us to put 10% down on, using what was available to us from our home equity line of credit. And so, from there, we got in touch with our realtor, again, fabulous guy, Travis Stokes. I put his link in the last video, so go back to that if you're in the greater Salt Lake, Ogden, Provo area. I mean, he serves all those, especially with his new brokerage called Stokes and Company. So check out Travis Stokes. But he started taking us after we got this approval to look, and we were looking at property after property.
In Utah County, which is the county we live in, so south of Salt Lake County. So we wanted something that we could manage
Close to home.
We looked at a lot of properties with a 2-year-old in tow everywhere we went. A lot of properties. And they just weren't, none of them were right.
Yeah, just... Something was just off. Either the numbers were just like barely there, but then you go see the property and realize, all right, it needs a little more work than we thought just to have it rent ready. Even though they would, qualify for bank financing, things just weren't making sense. And I remember we were in a property out in Lehi, Utah, looking, and Travis actually talked to us that night, and he's like, I know you guys haven't thought about flipping a property. I know that hasn't really been on your radar. But I've got one that, it's somebody's asked me to help them out in selling it quickly. They had some tenants who had just royally trashed the property. Yeah. It was in the Salt Lake metro area. So, I mean, it's a little drive, 45, 50 minutes somewhere in there. And
it wasn't yet listed. It wasn't even ready to be listed. They were trying to get it under the radar to somebody first. And he mentioned this actually several times to us. And we're looking for passive income, not hands-on. We weren't looking into flipping. I mean, but Travis knew that Russ had skill set. He knew how to do things. He knew how to make things happen in a property. And I think he just knew something that maybe we didn't know. Yeah.
And so, he would talk to us about this property, and basically he was going to set up an investor showing, because it's the kind of house that, it was tore apart pretty good. And so it was only going to qualify for somebody who had the cash to buy it, or who might use a hard money loan, which basically functions as cash for you when you go in to buy a property. And so...
that's what was a big deal on this house is... it wasn't going to qualify for bank financing. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to get the property?
And fortunately, I had studied on Bigger Pockets and understood a lot about hard money lenders, which these are basically, folks, and some of them actually are attached to a regular mortgage company, but they're basically to work outside. They do have some regulations depending on the state. So there are some safety net features, but basically these types of lenders serve as short-term financing. Basically, they're also called gap lenders, basically, to help you fill in a gap for something so you can get a property fixed up, and then you put it into permanent financing where your interest rates are low. With hard money lenders, their rates can be anywhere from 9% up, and the industry standard seems to be around 11 to 14%. But we knew, based on what Travis said and our trust of him, he's a master at pulling comparables and seeing just very specific, detailed numbers. And in this case, he told us that the sales price was going to be, somewhere in the 215 range is what 215 to 220 range, I think, is what he knew the owner was going to want to get out of this property for it to make sense. And then, but the property on the conservative end was going to sell for $300,000. I mean, he's very confident about that. And he said conservative, knowing that it would probably bring more, but we always base our numbers off of a conservative value. So really the question is how much work will need to be done. But we had run the numbers, and again, we're going to break these numbers down in detail for you next week, And that'll also help you to understand how to analyze a property using hard money. If, say, you don't have the cash yourself, but you need to borrow it. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Yeah, and I think something else to keep in mind is, he's mentioning these things to us. This is a home, again, it's not going to be passive income. It's going to be hands-on, but it's an hour away. This was Salt Lake County. 45 minutes to an hour away. It's going to be a haul to get up there to work, to come back. It's also a property where we can't take all of our kids. It was torn up, glass in the yard, everything. So, but yeah, we look at it, run the numbers, and it's sounding pretty good to us. So we're thinking, maybe we're going to flip a house. Yeah. And our realtor kept saying too, I really, if you get that chunk of cash, that will give you a good boost, boost. He's like, I really think you could use the boost. And it's like, maybe he's right. Maybe we could make a good chunk. And then it's our own cash free and clear. It's not our HELOC anymore. Yeah.
So that's what really, thinking that through was like, all right, we just got to do it. We just got to jump in and make it happen. Because again, when you don't have any money, it was almost like, and at our age at that point, which was like, 38, 37, 38, boy, it's kind of a weird thing to have. Is like, I mean, if we lose stuff, we always think about what's the worst thing that could happen. For us, it's like, we'll rent somewhere. That's kind of like the worst thing that we could think of that would happen is that we don't own our home, but we rent. But even that scenario just seemed very far in the distance. But that's what keeps a lot of people in this paralysis stage, by the way, is just the fear of the worst case scenario. And in fact, in the future, we want to talk about just like overcoming fears, just because when you get into property or real estate investing, everybody and their brother has an opinion. Everybody's going to tell you, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it's always thinking about the negative side of things without thinking about the reward. And so for us, it was just like, we just got to do it. And so knowing that there was a good amount of profit to be made on this house, we just had to figure it out, and start solving problems. So for us, with the hard money lender, I didn't know one at the time because we hadn't really been thinking along those lines. It was always rental. So here's something that we found to be important is not being afraid to get on the phone.
Yeah, let yourself be known. Let people know who you are, what you're looking for.
Yeah. Like we didn't think we'd get approved for a rental loan. I mean, but you just got to ask. A lot of people start learning how all the numbers work, but they never go to a bank. They never go to a realtor. They never look on. For us, we were looking, by the way, exclusively for rental properties on the MLS. The multiple listing service.
Realtor.com.
Realtor.com. I mean, there's just so many ways you can start looking and running numbers, which, by the way, we advise, like, if you don't know where to start in trying to find a property, there are deals to be found on the MLS. They're a little hard in a market like what we have right now to make them work, but they are out there. But it at least helps you to learn something. But now in this process, we're not talking about a loan from the bank. I mean, it's a hard money loan. And so I just got on the phone. I Googled local ones first to start there. And I called everyone that I could find and asking them, what's your interest rate? And here's some of the things that are important to know. You want to look at what is the interest rate that they're going to charge you? How many points are they going to charge you? So basically, it's a set dollar amount per $100,000 that you borrow. So 1 point typically, this is typically how it works, 1 point typically equals $1,000 per every $100,000 borrowed. If it's 4 points, that means you borrow, and this is just right out the gate, this is their fees basically, is $4,000 per $100,000 borrowed. And so you want low points and you want as low of an interest rate as you can get. The other thing that was helpful in this, to get hard money is I wanted to find somebody that might be gracious enough to say, you don't have to make any interest payments. We'll just take it at closing.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
It was yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't think we'd find it, honestly, because I heard it's very rare. But when you just start calling enough folks, you find out what their terms are, and then you've got a sheet that you can just start comparing, who's got the best terms. Well, one of the people I called offered me an 80%, actually it was 85%, a 15% down loan, basically, for our purchase price with 1.5 points up front and 12% interest. Yes, I said 12%. It is scary on that end, but that's a pretty standard rate.
Yeah, and I think something else to keep in mind that we need to share with you is this was a very big, scary deal for us. Yeah. Going from absolutely no debt except our home, and then contacting hard money lenders was a big deal. And so, the home's like around 220,000. We got to come up with the 15%, which again was going to come from our HELOC. Well, guess that what? That was like 90%, 95% of all of our HELOC money.
Yeah.
So that's gone. Now, where are we going to come up with the money to renovate the place? Because this thing needed about $30,000 worth of renovations.
Yeah. And it wound up being more. By the way,
it's always more.
Finance flipping, it's always going to cost you more. Yeah. It's just try to have a percentage in mind as to how much more you're actually going to be willing to go.
And we'll talk more about that next week. Yeah. Break all that down for you. But this meant a big deal. That meant we have to find no interest credit cards in order to finance or pay for the renovations. Yeah. And we had to max them out. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was scary. Yeah. That was really scary.
It is scary. But here's something that's important. I want people to understand, we really do believe in living debt free. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds a bit hypocritical at this point, but again, if you can get your mind to start thinking of, okay, if I can use a bit of debt right now that helps to create something that overcomes the debt and the risk that comes with that, so the reward is worth it. There's an asset of some sort that's coming from a liability, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. And actually, in our case, it made a lot more sense because this is how much it's going to cost. This is how much it's going to cost to borrow this money, but this is how much we're going to make at the end. And the cards get paid off immediately. Our HELOC gets paid back immediately. So it's costing us at that point. We're just back to square one, and then you've got this chunk of change sitting in the bank. And our credit
scores rose out the roof. Crazy. We didn't expect that at all.
Yeah. I mean, our credit scores
they kind of sink for a little while, and then they go out the roof.
And then so they're constantly just building up.
A plus for us.
And we were thankful to already have good credit, but, not borrowing didn't have us just at like the super high number that we have right now. So, all that being said, it's just a learning curve. And it all goes back somewhat to just this idea of analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can learn all this stuff and say, all right, here's a reward at the end of the day that, barring some, tragic event, which we know can happen to anybody at any time. But, in the current market and conditions, the way things were, is a pretty safe thing to say, all right, we're going to see this as an investment and that we will get to reap a reward for. Mm-hmm. And the reward for us was worth it to say, we can't just stay stuck, continue to analyze properties, but not do something. And so on this one, what was fun is there was an investor showing set up. So several investors were going to get to come by in these different time intervals. And so we were more towards the front, and we're the newbies.
We're investors.
So you want to tell them a little bit about, when we showed up?
I don't really remember a whole lot of it, but I just, because I think I was oblivious to what was going on. But there were some big wigs walking around us saying, "Oh, this is your first flip. Ha ha ha! You're going to be in over your head." And what I will show you.
Yeah, they were just definitely trying to put some fear tags, because they would ask, "Is this your first one?" And I don't want to lie, so I'm just like, "Yeah, it's our first one," and they're like, "Boy, this one's bad." I remember one of them was like, "This is bad," and he called his wife or significant other to go and get some meth tests. He's like, "Have you seen the meth scores? Go get the meth test, honey," and just start sticking them on the wall and everything. And it was just a tactic, really, to try to make us frightened from doing anything. But at the end of the day, we had analyzed our numbers, which we will share with you. We had a plan, and we were going to stick to the plan. Like, this is the max that we can give for this property, and this is what it's going to cost us to renovate it. And you stick to your guns. That's something that's so important when you get into real estate investing. You've got to stick to your numbers, because there's the safety net that you have for yourself right there.
Yeah. So next week, again, we're going to break all this down for you on our very first property, just in the hopes that those of you that want to get started in real estate, maybe you're still nervous, you still just don't quite get it. Okay, we're going to help you understand all the nitty-gritty numbers and the details behind that, to help you understand how we analyze a property and how you can go about analyzing your first property.
And maybe even to think about, what do you have to work with? Because in this market, it's not unlikely that some of you have some equity in your house. You may say, "I don't have anything in my savings," but you have some equity. And especially if you've got minimal to no debt, the ideal is having no debt up front. Really puts you in the safest position possible. But yeah, just the big thing is, you can do it. So many people have had a dream to flip a property or buy a rental property, and we say it every week. We're ordinary people, and you can do it.
And again, if you missed last week's video, go back and check that out, where we talk about the podcast Bigger Pockets. That was very useful in your education, and the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah. And I'm going to put a link in as well today for one of the podcasts that was on Bigger Pockets this week. I'll give you the YouTube version of it, but you can link up to the listening only version if you want from there. But it's all about overcoming analysis paralysis. Yeah, it's Lauren and Kyle Clugston. They use a certain strategy called the BRRRR process to renovate and keep as long-term rentals, and they're doing really good work in New Jersey. And so the podcast was great on overcoming analysis paralysis. We think it'll be helpful. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we look forward to seeing you in the days ahead. Please feel free, again, if this has been helpful, to like and subscribe.